Morning everybody, it's Ivan. Just thought I'd make a video to share a couple of things with you guys that's really on my heart, that I believe the Lord wants me to just share with you guys to have a look at and then decide for yourself. We'll get into the detail of the subject. So I started getting myself together on the veranda and to prepare this, to put this video together. And well, we are in South Africa. It's about 5 degrees at the moment. We've had a cold front that's come through, and for us, like 5 degrees is like, that's cold. So we're used to warm weather. So we're a bit wussy when it comes to the cold. And I was trying to find a warm spot, and where it was also nice and quiet, so I can put this video together without too many barking dogs and my family in and out. And so it's not a professional video. It's just a very amateurish video, but I just want to get a message across to you guys. And so I was sitting in the sun to stay warm, and it's a relatively quiet spot. The problem is when the sun was shining on my screen and I couldn't see what I was trying to show you guys, so it was a bit frustrating. But needed a warm place. I can't think straight when it's cold, and I've come to appreciate some of what Alan has been going through in his garage when he's got that heater going. And I don't know how you do it, bro. You can't think straight when you're getting cold. So anyway, so I took a break, and I decided to come and switch on the sprinklers in the greenhouse. And so I thought I'd just start all over again and just give you an idea of the environment, the setting. And then I'm going to switch over to my laptop. I'm recording this on my phone now, and I'll switch over to my laptop and record the message that I want to share with you guys. I just want to switch over to the other camera, if I can do that, to show you where I am. Let's just see if we can. I think it's there. Okay, I'll just piece this video together. I had to pause it or stop it and then just switch the cameras around so that I can show you the other side of the scene. I think you've seen enough of my face. That'll be the last time you see my face on this video. But I just thought this is a greenhouse that we built during this lockdown, my son Baron and I, and it was basically from scratch, and we've just started filling it up with veggies and that. So we call it the White House. So for obvious reasons, in the color, but also we've got vegetables growing in here. So, White House, vegetables. So I know it's a bit dry. I think Sean Stainless Steel is good brother. He's the witty one. You'll appreciate it. Anyway, so I thought I'd just show you this is where I'm going to sit, and it's nice and warm in here. The lighting is perfect. Got light without it being direct sunlight, so I'll be able to see my screen. And got the sprinklers going. I just need to make sure that there's no drops falling on my laptop. That wouldn't be good. So we got this going over the last couple of months, and we've got a couple of veggies, not full yet. As long as we've got time, we'll carry on. Eventually these other beddings will be filled up as well. So this is what we want to leave behind. If for those that have to survive, I believe that this area that we live in, it's a valley, a very protected valley. And I can't say it's not a thus saith the Lord, but I do believe that there will be safe areas during the time of the seals, and I'm praying and hoping and believing that this will be one of those for whoever needs it. So we decided to finish this White House and leave it behind for those that need to survive and grow food and make ends meet. I thought that would just give you some idea about the setting, and then I'm going to switch over to my laptop and get on to the message that I want to share with you guys. Okay, I think I'm set up good enough now to get this recording done. It's first of all, it's Sunday the 12th of July. It's just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon here in South Africa, and I've been wanting to put this video together for a few days now, but I needed to go back and just refresh on some of my previous studies. with regards to Enoch. Enoch's come up again quite a bit lately. In particular, the section, the chapters on the luminaries, where Enoch describes the movements of the sun and the moon. And when I saw that, it took me back to a good couple of years, about 3 or 4 years ago. I spent a fair amount of time. I was reading through Enoch, and I came across this the description that he's got in his book. That's Enoch Volume 1. And at that time, I was spending a fair amount of time. In fact, it's probably about four years ago. I was spending quite a lot of time trying to understand God's creation, trying to understand this whole issue of the globe model versus the flat Earth model. And I know this is going to be a potentially controversial subject. I'm not here to try and convince you either way. I just want to present to you some facts and maybe try and take you through an alternative understanding of what Enoch is actually saying. And in any case, I spent a fair amount of time, about 4 years, trying to understand the God's creation. This is not a salvation issue, and I believe it's a love issue. You know, it's one of those things. It's like knowing God's name. You know, the bride wants to know His name, wants to know everything about Him, wants to know how He thinks, wants to know how Jesus created this world. The bride loves the Word, loves to get into the Word, and loves the truth. And that's what we really should be doing, is seeking after the truth on all matters, and seeing what does the Word of God say on these matters. And then we've got these extra books that some people believe are authentic, and others that believe they're not. I'm not here to try and debate that particular issue. I'm just, it has been brought up, and particularly in this instance about Enoch and his luminaries. And I just wanted so as I say, it took me back to that time when I was studying it. At that time, Rob Skiba was doing a lot of work, putting a lot of stuff out there. There were many other guys, and things have died down a little bit in the last 2 years with regards to this whole flat Earth concept. And anyway, so I know it's a very controversial subject. I've seen it in my own family. People get angry when you get onto that subject. It is a very emotive issue. I remember at the time I was angry. I felt a tremendous amount of anger when I started to understand how this world really looks and what was going on. I got angry, and I think it was anger at having what I believed. I still believe that we've been lied to. We've been lied to big time. But again, I'm not here to convince you. I just want to take you through some interesting stuff, and you can evaluate it in your own time, and you make your own decision on that matter. Like I say, it's not a salvation issue. This is for those that are seeking after the truth, and whichever way you decide, whether you believe it's the luminaries are based on a global model, or whether you believe that there's truth in the flat Earth model, that's entirely up to you. I just want to get an opportunity to shed some light on the subject. So that's what I really want to have a look at, is Enoch in particular. And I believe that the problem that we're experiencing with the Enoch is that people read, particularly that section on the luminaries, with their filter of the globe model. So they try and understand what he's saying from a global model perspective. And I believe that's where things go wrong. When you start reading Enoch from a flat Earth model perspective, then things start falling into place. And so that's what I want to just do. I'm going to take you through the text and take you through a couple of concepts, and then I'm going to go into Stellarium, and I'm going to show you a couple of things in Stellarium. And I believe that when you see what I'm going to show you in this video, I think you'll read Enoch's luminaries and his description of his luminaries in a whole different understanding, a whole new light. So that's my purpose. That's my aim. I'm going back to the. I got Enoch's. There's a lovely site here called the Sacred Texts. Texts.com, and there's they've got all the apocryphal books here, and a lot of other stuff as well. So it's actually a really great site to go to. So it's sacredtexts.com, and you can find all these books. And there's 2 translations for Enoch. There's a more recent one in 1917 by R.H. Charles, and he uses a more modern English in his translation. And then there's also the other translation, the one goes a bit older, it was dated 1883 by Richard Lawrence. And this is the one that I prefer to use. They are very, very similar, but the wording is slightly different. In the more modern one, you will see R.H. Charles uses words like portal. He refers to, you'll see the word portal throughout. Whereas in Lawrence's translation, he uses the word gate. So I want to go through that and just try and understand exactly what is Enoch really saying here. And so what I've done is I've copied the text from this site, and I've just put it into a Word document where so that I can highlight it and use it as a reference. So I'm going to use the Richard Lawrence translation, the 1883 translation. And I'm largely going to cover it from chapter 71, section 13. But there's a few comments just prior to that I think are relevant. So I've included the last 6 chapters of the previous, the last few verses of the previous chapter. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go through this, and I just want to highlight a couple of things, and then take you through Stellarium, and see if we can understand what Enoch was actually saying here. And so what happened here was that Enoch, it says the Ancient of Days came with Michael and Gabriel, Raphael and Phanuel, with thousands of thousands and myriads of myriads, which could not be numbered. And he said, then that angel came to me with his voice, saluted me, saying, Thou art the offspring of man, thou art born for righteousness, and righteousness has rested on thee. The righteousness of the Ancient of Days shall not forsake thee. And all, I just want to jump here, all who shall exist, who shall walk in thy path of righteousness, shall not forsake thee forever. The path of integrity shall the righteous pursue. So in other words, truth. The path of integrity, or the truth. The righteous will seek the truth. And this was a warning, or a prophecy that was given to Enoch at the time, that with regards to truth and righteousness, and those that will seek the truth. So with that having been said, let's just get on to understanding what Enoch had to say with regards to the luminaries. It's in 2 sections. The first section, it covers the sun, and it's all regarding the sun, and the second section concerns the moon. So I'm going to work through the sun section first, and I'm just going to work through it very quickly in the text and highlight a few things so that you can see the patterns, and then I'm going to go back and word for word go through it in Stellarium, so we can see if we can track that understanding. Right, so in the book of Revolutions of the Luminaries of Heaven, according to their respective classes, their respective powers, and their respective periods, and their respective names, their places where they commence their progress, and their respective months, which Uriel, the holy angel, who was with me, explained to me. He who conducts them, the whole account of them according to every year of the world forever, until a new work shall be effected, which will be eternal. So I think that it's important to note that there was an until clause put in, that there was something that was going to change. And I believe that change happened at the flood. We will see now, because there's a couple of things that Enoch refers to in terms of the duration of a year, etc., which we now know and we can measure to be not entirely in line with what Enoch was saying here. So there's no getting around it. That's a measurable thing. It's a fact. Where Enoch is referring to a 364-day year, we know that our current year is 365 and a quarter, approximately. I think it's 365.2425. So we know that something has changed. We also know that the moon has got a cycle of about 29.5 days. And that's also something that, well, I think Enoch actually alludes to that, but I'll get into that a little bit later when we start talking about the moon description that Enoch gives us. So, getting into Enoch's first law of the luminaries, that's the sun and the light. The sun and the light arrive at the gates of heaven, which are on the east and on the west. So he's talking about gates on the east and on the west of it, and the western gates of heaven. And I beheld the gates, which were gates where the sun goes forth. So in other words, where the sun rises, and the gates where the sun sets. In which gates also the moon rises and sets. And I beheld the conductors of the stars among those who precede them, 6 gates at the rising and 6 at the setting. So we now introduced to these gates, and we need to understand what are these gates. And understand there's a few people that translate these gates to mean the constellations, the 12 constellations. I don't believe that is a correct interpretation of these gates, and I'll show you why. So we need to understand what are these gates. What was Enoch talking about these gates? Okay, he goes on to say that all these respectively, one after another, on one level. So he's referring to the gates. They're all one after the other and on one level, and there are numerous windows on the right and on the left side of those gates. So there's windows on the left and right of the gate. We need to also understand what are these windows. So we've got gates and windows here. Then he goes on to say, first proceeds forth that great luminary, that's the sun, which is called the sun, the orb of which is as the orb of heaven, the whole of it being repeat with splendid and flaming fire. Sorry, just my interpretation, my pronunciation, struggling there. But okay, so these orbs, what is an orb? We've now got 3 words: gates, windows, orbs, that we need to deal with. And then it goes in its chariot, where it ascends, the wind blows. So what does that mean? So we've got another word to understand. What does he mean by chariots? Okay, then he goes on to say the sun sets in heaven, and returning by the north, so by the north to proceed towards the east, is conducted so as to enter by the gate, by that gate, the luminary, the face of heaven. Okay, enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. So the sun goes in, proceeds towards the east, and it enters that gate and it illuminates the face of the heaven. So there's already the first clue that we need to watch out for, this face of heaven. What does he mean by that? Okay. In the same manner it goes forth, it rises, in other words, in the first month by a great gate. It goes forth through the fourth of those 6 gates. So it goes through the fourth of those 6 gates, which are at the rising of the sun. And in the fourth gate, through which the sun with the moon proceeds, in the first part of it. So in the beginning, it leaves from the fourth gate. So it proceeds with the sun and the moon, both proceed from the fourth gate. Okay, and then there are 12 open windows from which issue out a flame when they are opened at their proper periods. So we've got these 12 windows that are opened that are open periodically. Okay, we'll get back. We're going to go back to this. I just want to get the terminology that he uses right throughout, and some of the order of things, the order of the movement, so that we can try and understand what these things are doing. Okay, so when the sun rises in heaven, it goes forth through this fourth gate 30 days. And by the fourth gate, in the west of the heaven, on the level with it, it descends. So on the level with it, it descends. At the fourth gate as well. So it goes for 30 days through this fourth gate, and then it descends. Okay, during that period, the day is lengthened from the day, and the night curtails from the night for 30 days. And when the day is longer by 2 parts than the night, and then the day is longer by 2 parts than the night. The day is precisely 10 parts, and the night is 8 parts. So we've got a total of 18 parts. At this time, when it's going through the fourth gate, the day is longer than the night by 2 parts. So 10 parts are allocated to the day, and the night is shorter. It's only got 8 parts. Okay. The sun goes forth through this fourth gate, and it sets in it and turns to the fifth gate during 30 days. After which it proceeds or rises and sets in the fifth gate. So it goes from the fourth gate to the fifth gate. Then the day becomes lengthened by a second portion, so that it is 7 parts, while the night becomes shortened. It is only, the day is 11 parts. So let me read that again. And then the day becomes lengthened by a second portion, so that it becomes 11 parts. Remember, it was 10 parts, it's now 11 parts. While the night becomes shortened and is now only 7 parts. It was 8 before, now it's 7 parts. So the day's getting longer, the night's getting shorter. And the sun now returns to the east, entering into the sixth gate. Okay, and rising and setting in the sixth gate. Okay, so that should have been read. 31 days. So we had 30 days, and now 31. And it's in the sixth gate. It went from fourth gate to fifth gate to sixth gate on account of its size. Okay. At that period, the day is longer than the night, being twice as long as the night, and becomes 12 parts. Okay, so when it goes from the fifth gate to the sixth gate, it goes from 11 parts to 12 parts. But the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts. So it was 7 parts in the previous gate, and now it's 6 parts. So now we've got still a total of 18 parts, but 12 parts allocated to the sun, and 6 parts allocated to the night. So in other words, the day is longer than the night by those ratios. Okay. Then it carries on to say, the sun rises up. At that day, so it rises up that day may be shortened and the night lengthened. So in other words, there's something that happens. There's a turnaround. It rises up, or it changes direction, or something happens, and the days are going to start becoming shorter, and the nights are going to start becoming longer. That's what he's saying there. Okay, and the sun returns towards the east, entering into the sixth gate. So it was in the sixth gate. It must have gone out of the sixth gate, and now it's returning into the sixth gate, where it rises and sets for 30 days. So we've gone 4, 5, 6 out of the 6 and back into the 6 again. Okay, it was 30, and then 31, and then it's turned around. So now it turns around and it goes 30 days back through through the 6th gate. Okay. Then that period, when that period is complete, I've chosen colors that are a bit difficult to read with this. The day becomes shortened precisely 1 part, so that it is 11 parts. So it was 12 parts, and now it becomes 11 parts, while the night is 7 parts. Remember, it was 6 parts, so it's back to 7 parts. It's getting longer. And the sun goes forth from the west, from that 6th gate, and proceeds eastwards, rising in the 5th gate. Hang on a second. We're going back into the 5th gate again. Now, so we're going from the 6th back to the 5th for 30 days, setting again westwards in the 5th gate. Okay, so and the period that the day becomes shortened by 2 parts, and now I think that's an error because I think it's only 1 part, because it was 11 and it goes down to 10 parts, while the night is 8 parts. Remember, it was 7 parts, it was 6, then 7, and now it's 8. So it's still, the night is getting longer, the day is getting shorter still. Then the sun goes forth from the 5th gate, as it sets in the 5th gate of the west, and rises in the 4th gate for 31 days on account of its sign. So we got the sun going from the 4th, we go back to the beginning, we got from the 4th to the 5th to the 6th, out, and then back into the 6th, and then through the 5th and into the 4th. Now, you know, there's been some interpretation that these gates are the constellations, the 12 constellations. And I'm going to show you in Stellarium that this interpretation, this what Enoch is explaining here, and the sun moving in the order of 4, 5, 6 back into 6, 5, 4 cannot possibly be describing the constellations. At this point I want to suggest to you, I can't say for certain, but it does fit the model. I believe the 12 windows that you referred to earlier, which put forth fire, etc., and come to light in their season or in their period, I believe those are the 12 constellations that are lying on the path of the sun. Okay, so I'll show you graphically just now. So just bear that in mind. And he also said that there were windows both on the left and the right, or it maybe comes later. But he had the 12 windows, and there were other windows as well. So we've got something else here. These gates are not the constellations that are all sequential. The sun doesn't go through a constellation and then come back. It doesn't go through the 6th and then come back through the 5th again. Okay, it only keeps on going in one direction. But yeah, these gates are in such an order that the sun goes through them and then comes back again. Alright, so we just need to bear that in mind. We've got to find something that fits that pattern. Okay, then it carries on to say at the period, so it went where we 5th gate, and it rises in the 5th gate for 31 days. Okay, and at that period, the day is made equal to the night, and being equal to it, the night becomes 9 parts and the day becomes 9 parts. So we always have 18 parts. Yeah, we have a situation now where, in what situation do we know in the world when the day is equal to the night? Well, that's when the sun is on the equator. So we're already starting to get an idea here that these length of days and the lengthening of the days, and then and the shortening of the night, and then the reverse. This is related to the movement of the sun, okay, through the seasons. So we've got a situation where it's going in a certain direction, and the days are getting longer and then they're getting shorter, and we know that relates to the sun moving across from the equator, where the days and nights are equal, up to the Tropic of Cancer, and then back again to the equator. Okay, that's what we've just read now. We can see that this whole picture is starting to form. Okay, so if we carry on now, then the sun goes forth from that gate being the 4th gate, because we had the 5th and then the 4th, and in the 4th they were equal parts, and now it goes from that gate, sets in the west, and returning to the east, proceeds to the 3rd gate for 30 days. So now this is the first time the 3rd gate has been mentioned. And at the 3rd gate, so at that period the night is lengthened from the day during 30 mornings, and the day is curtailed or shortened from the day during 30 days, and the night being 10 parts precisely and the day 8 parts. So we now get the reverse situation where the night is getting longer and the day is getting shorter. So this is Enoch. We're getting an idea. Enoch was situated in the northern hemisphere, and he was experiencing first the summer, and now the northern hemisphere is going into the winter period. That's what's happening here. Okay, so the sun now goes forth from the 3rd gate, and it sets in the 3rd gate in the west, but returning to the east, it proceeds by the 2nd gate of the east for 30 days. So we had 30 days in the 3rd gate, and now we're going into the 2nd gate for 30 days. And in like manner, it also sets in the 2nd gate and in the west of the heaven. Okay, so it goes up and down, it rises and sets in the 2nd gate. And at that period, the night is 11 parts and the day is 7 parts. So night is continuously getting longer, day shorter. Sun goes, then the sun goes at that time from the second gate, as it sets in the second gate in the west, it returns in the east, preceding by, okay, these are all words that he inserted, okay, preceding these ones in italic. So some of them I'm going to highlight. I think they've got the wrong inserts, okay, so they added some words here that are not necessarily correct. I don't have a problem with this one. So we have a situation where the sun proceeds by the to the first gate for 31 days. Okay, so we were at the fourth gate, and then he says it goes to the third gate, and then the second gate, and now the first gate. And it was 30 days, 30 days. We can see 30 days, 30 days, and now it's 31 days, and it's in gate 1. Okay, and it sits in the west in the first gate. And at that period, the night is lengthened as much again as the day. Okay, so 1 part extra for the night and 1 part less for the day. And it is now 12 parts precisely, while the day is 6 parts. So we have the opposite situation, where the first time round, when it was at the 6th gate, we had 12 parts to the day and 6 parts to the night. Now we've got 12 parts to the night and 6 parts to the day. So clearly now this is winter. This has now reached the winter solstice. So the Tropic of Capricorn in our naming, in modern day naming. Okay, so the sun has thus completed its beginnings, and the second time it goes forth from these beginnings. So what is that? Well, this is another turnaround. Remember the last time we had that turnaround, it says it rises, and then it was out of the 6th gate, and then it went back into the 6th gate. Well, we get another situation of exactly that again. It's turned around, and it goes into that gate. This what he's referring to, that gate is the first gate. So it went through the first gate, out, same situation as was the 6th gate, where it went out of the gate. Now it comes one day out, and then it's back in again, and it's back into that gate being the first gate for 30 days. So it's 30 days in the first gate, out for 1 day, and back into the first gate for another 30 days. And it sets in the west, in the opposite part of heaven. Okay, and we'll see all of this. This will become much more graphical when we start looking at stellarium. Okay, at that period, the night the night is contracted in its length to length a fourth part, that is 1 portion. Okay, this fourth part I never really got out, but it's 1 portion. Okay, the night contracts by 1 portion and becomes 11 parts. It was 12, it's now 11, and the day is now lengthened by, it was 6, it's now 7 parts. So we're getting the reverse situation. The sun is now coming back. Okay, and then the sun returns and enters into the second gate of the east. So we're now coming back. So it was in the first, it's coming back, and it goes there for 30 days. And then the period, in that period, the night is contracted in its length. It becomes 10 parts, and the day 8 parts. And the sun goes forth from that second gate and sets in the west, but returns to the east and rises in the east in the third gate, 31 days. So yeah, we have another one of those situations. We've got it went, when it left the fourth gate, it went 30 days through the third gate, 30 days through the second gate, 30 plus 1, 31 days in the first gate, comes around, 30 days again, another 30 days in the second gate, and then 31 days going through the third gate to arrive back at the fourth gate. And at that period, the night becomes shortened. It is 9 parts, and the night is equal to the day. And we're now back at the equator. The year is precisely 364 days. Okay, so that pretty much takes us through the description. I don't think there's anything here. The length of the day and night, the lengthening of the day and night, and so I should have actually used the white text on some of this. It's a bit difficult to read. Just going to change that. The lengthening of the day and night and the contraction of the day and night are made to differ from each other by the progress of the sun. Okay, that's pretty much, we understood that. And then this one, this is the law and progress of the sun in its turning when it turns back during 60 days. Now what is that 60 days? That was you'll remember in gate 6, it went 30 days into gate 6, and then 1 day, 31 it was 30 plus 1, and then another 30. So you don't count that one where it turns around. So it's 30 days in, that's where the 60 days is. It's about the 60 days in gate 6 and then 60 days in gate 1. So that's what this is all related to, and you'll see that also. Okay, and then it goes on to say, this is the important part as well. This is fairly important. This is this is everlasting luminary, which he named the sun and forever and ever. And it also, this also is that which goes forth, a great luminary, and which is named after its peculiar kind, as God commanded. And thus it goes in and out, neither slackening nor resting, but running in its chariot by day and by night. It shines with a 7th portion of light from the moon. So in other words, this I think is not entirely stated correctly. It's 7 times brighter than the moon. When we get to the moon, you'll see that the moon is 7 times dimmer than the sun. So that's, and then, but this is the important part. But the dimensions of both, the dimensions of the sun and the moon are equal. So there's our second hint of what we're dealing with here. We are not dealing here with the global model. The global model requires a huge big sun and a relatively smaller moon. The flat earth model is reliant on the moon equaling the sun in size and much closer to the surface of the earth. But they're both of the same size, just different brightnesses. So we can see there's definitely something happening here. Enoch's description is fitting the flat earth model much more closely. Okay, this next section we'll deal with later. This is the next section, chapter 72. It deals with the moon. But I just want to go back and take you into Stellarium and deal with these, and just show you graphically of what he was describing here. Oh yes, I want to just also this orb thing. What is the orb? An orb is this word that was translated orbia. I think in the modern that he spoke about circumference. He translated that particular word to circumference, as opposed to orb. Now, if you search the word orb, you'll come up. It's a ball. I don't believe that this is exactly what the sun and moon is. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail of what I did about 4 years ago. I used a program that you can download for free. It's a 3D a program that you can create models with, graphical models with. It's called Blender. And I used Blender, and I created a full 3D model of both the globe model and the flat earth model. And I had the thing fully working in every aspect, every single aspect that is described with regards to how the sun and moon move. I was able to model in the 3D model on the flat earth as well. So I'm going to just give you some graphical representations of what, because I think some people might know what we're talking about when we're talking about the flat earth, but I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with regards to what we believe the flat earth looks like when we're talking about the flat earth and how the sun and the moon move. I think most people are familiar with the global model, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that one. But I think it's well worth, if we're going to talk about comparing Enoch to the flat earth, that everybody at least needs to understand what it looks like. So, and I'm going to get into this orb thing again. When I modeled it, let me just say to you this. I was able to model, because I think most people that ascribe to the flat earth are unable to explain how the moon phases work. And to be quite honest, when I modeled it, I was really struggling with that particular aspect, until I realized that the moon and the earth do not stay on the same plane. In other words, they change in elevation as they're going around. So I'm going to show you a graphic, and I'll explain that again later. And it was that change in elevation that fixed my problem with regards to the moon's phases. So I'll get into a little bit more detail on that. But let's just have a look at this is a this is a presentation that Rob Skiba did some time ago. Rob Skiba spent a lot of time on the flat earth a while ago, and then all of a sudden he took most of his stuff off YouTube. I don't know why. I don't know what happened there. I think he was taking a fair amount of pressure, a fair amount of flack. I know that his main source of income was speaking at various conventions, etc. Speaking as a Christian, biblical stuff. He speaks a lot about the Nephilim and the situation on the earth before the flood. He goes into a lot of detail on that, and he does some really great teachings in that regard. And then he started getting into the flat earth concept, and he spent a fair amount of time and effort trying to investigate that, and he put a lot of videos together on that, and I think he stopped getting orders. So that's the only thing I can think of, because all of a sudden he just pulled down all his stuff, and I think he just, I don't know what he believes now, quite honestly, but he put this particular thing together, which I thought was pretty interesting, and it gives you a pretty good explanation of what most people understand to be the flat earth model. So what we've got a situation here is that the earth is not on a ball, but it is in fact on a flat plate, okay, and with the North Pole in the center, and the position of the continents, etc., are situated like this, okay. With the South Pole not being a point, but actually being a complete wall of ice all the way around, and so this is what keeps the whole thing together. So the water doesn't get through this. In fact, well, this graphic just shows a small sliver, but I believe that this could actually be way wider than what's shown here. I don't think we really know how deep this section is. I think it goes much deeper. And then of course over this is the firmament. I don't have a graphic for that, but it's like a big dome that's over this whole lot that the stars moving the dome, and then you've got the earth, you've got the flat earth with the sun and the moon rotating over the surface, over the face of the earth. It's just interesting that this particular layout here is used by none other than the United Nations. That's their United Nations logo, and you'll see that is exactly what's in their logo, that whole picture, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. There you can see there's South America and North America, and notice how small North America is in compared to what they show on the globe model, eh? And then you've got Africa, and then you've got Australia. And I'm going to explain to you these shape differences as well. There's a reason for these shape differences on the globe model. It's because of what they did to fit it on a ball, to stretch it on a ball. Oh, well, let me deal with it right now. So what they actually did was they took this flat, what is a flat situation, and then used what is called equal area mapping. So each of the blocks, that for each block that is taken, and they stretched this thing. So if you can imagine this being like a flat rubber or flat flexible disc, put over a ball where the North Pole is on the North Pole of the ball, and then this being stretched over around the ball. Now they had a problem that this would only get as far as the equator. If you can imagine that, so it's like a cap. Okay, you got the cap, and this would only reach the equator to keep the sizes, if you kept the current sizes. I hope you can imagine that. I was going to try and find some graphics to try and explain that, but just imagine a ball, putting this thing on the top, North Pole to North Pole, and then stretching it down. Then what they had to do was, in order to complete the picture, what we call the edges were stretched right down to the bottom and brought together into one landmass. So what is now described as the Antarctic. And in that process, all these land masses became stretched. So Australia, if you look on the globe model, you'll see Australia is about double. It's about the same in length this way, but it's about double in this direction. It's not a long, narrow island. It's very different shaped. Africa is also much longer. The United States is shown as a huge area. I mean, it's stretched. Same with South America continent. It is all stretched out. Not much change happens at the north here. This whole section in the north doesn't change much. All the changes are mainly the further away that they get away from the North Pole, the greater the stretch, the greater the change, the greater the distortion as they stretch this thing over the globe to make it work. So that's how I believe that this is the original. There are some old maps that actually show this exact picture that goes back quite far. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the United Nations uses this very map in their logo. It's absolutely perfectly identical. And for some of the reason there was a change. Interesting enough, that's the latest one. There was a previous version. If you have a look at this version here, which was, I don't know, it's dated 2008, you'll see there. And they state here there was a correction. Yeah, they rendered correctness of some of the previous distortions of the map. For example, how the line of 90 degrees along, west longitude had erroneously intersected South America. See, on this one here, you see that one line goes through, but the new one, it's rotated. So they changed that. They've moved from that to well, there's the so you'll see there's still a couple of these ones drifting around. But most of them are now looking like that, with a bit of a gap between that longitudinal line and South America. But I believe this is one of those instances where the enemy puts it right in our faces and laughs at us, knowing full well that this is exactly what the world really looks like, what the Earth looks like. The other interesting thing is, when I looked at it, and I don't want to get too much into this, but you can go and check it out for yourself. When those that are pilots will know that this is the map that pilots and the shipping industry use to map out their routes, and that's because it is the true map. And I love to use this as an example. In South Africa, when we fly to Perth, our flights fly via Dubai. Okay, and I've always wondered, in the globe model, you can go and have a look on a globe model. You go from the southern hemisphere. Dubai is way in the northern hemisphere, and then right all the way back down to the southern hemisphere to get down to Perth in Australia. It's just absolutely crazy. Why they wouldn't not? It would have been much shorter just to do a flight straight over, and then still with today's planes they'd be able to do it. But when you look at it from this perspective, you can understand why they fly virtually a straight line. And it makes perfect sense that why they would stop over at Dubai and refuel and not do that. If you look on the globe, you'll see it's a massive out of the on the globe. It looks like a way out of the route flight just to go back again. You go right out to the north and then all the way back to the south again. There's some other routes as well. I think the South Africa to New York route stops off at to refuel, usually either on the tip of Africa here or even London. And again, it makes total sense on this map, but it makes no sense at all on the globe maps. But that you can go check out for yourself. All right, so enough of that. I want to this was what Rob Skiba put together a while ago, and he put this together to try and explain the winter and summer situations with regards to the sun and the moon. So I'm going to play this, and what you're going to see here is the sun is rotating around in a circle. So you've got the brighter one is the sun, and the moon is that smaller one. So right there they're together at the moment. So that would be full moon. A new moon when there's no light, no given light, and then eventually the sun starts pulling away. The sun rotates at a faster speed than the moon. So you can see the moon is now fallen behind, and it gets brighter and brighter as it goes through the phases. So the moon is just slightly slower, and it falls behind and falls behind. Now getting to the situation where they're more or less equal. So they're opposite. Let me just pause this. So now if you go draw a line through the sun, through the pole, they're more or less in line. Okay, it's actually gone a little bit beyond. The moon is caught up a little bit. If I go back a bit, you'll see it actually forms a straight line, and that is the moment when it's full moon, when the sun and the moon are directly 180 degrees opposite each other. That's full moon. And when they're together, it's new moon. And when they're 90 degrees, it's the first quarter, and 90 degrees the other side is the third quarter. So again, in Stellarium we'll go into more detail. You see Rob's graphic, it does model that change in the moon. You'll see it's a full moon situation, and as I play it again, you'll see it'll get smaller and smaller and smaller, and bigger as it gets closer and further away from the moon. So as it gets closer, well, what's going to happen now is the sun is going to catch up, and it's going to get smaller until it disappears, and then it's going to run away from it, and the moon's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until it's full moon, and then catch up again, and it's going to get smaller until new moon, and then get bigger and bigger, and so it goes on. And you'll also notice when I play this thing, you'll see how the sun is now running in a circle over the outer section of the Earth, and when I play it, you'll see slowly but surely the sun's going to get closer and closer and closer, and that's what Rob was trying to show you. You've got the equator in the middle, and you've got the sun gets as far as the Tropic of Capricorn, and then it turns around and it goes over the equator and it goes to the Tropic of Cancer, and so you've got when it's over the Tropic of Cancer, that's summer conditions for the northern hemisphere. Over the equator, it's the spring equinox or autumn equinox, depending on which hemisphere you're in. And then when it's on the furthest out over the Tropic of Capricorn, that's when it's summer for the southern hemisphere and winter for the northern hemisphere. You'll also notice when it plays, you'll see that in these sections the sun is actually traveling faster than when it's in the middle section. In other words, it takes the same amount of time to get, in 1 hour it'll jump from there to there when it's on the outer circle, but in 1 hour when it jumps a much smaller distance. So that can only happen if the sun is actually traveling at a slower speed. And that is, if you go and search the globe model, they talk about the speed of the sun. In fact, they talk about the speed of the disk in many instances. I've come across a lot of literature in the NASA literature where they talk about the disk of the sun. And I believe they know exactly what this world really looks like and how it really works. Anyway, so this is when it's summer on the outside. It's summer in the southern hemisphere at the moment, and it's winter in the northern hemisphere. But that's going to change as the sun. So I'm going to just play this thing again, and you'll see. I'm going to let it run for a while. Don't get dizzy. You'll see now it's catching up. The sun is catching up to the moon. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. What I could actually do is maybe just change the play speed a bit so that you can just see for a few rotations. Let's just slow it right down. Okay, so that would be a Newman situation. There's no light given, and there you see the sun is pulling away from the moon now. It's getting, and it'll start getting its first phase, and the phases will go through for 7 days, and then it gets larger and larger and larger. Okay, the graphic is not very clear yet. It's there. It'll pop up now. It's just that in Rob's graphic, you didn't get all the detail in this thing. You'll see there it starts popping, and there it suddenly disappears. But it was growing and growing. It's not a great graphic, but it does illustrate the purpose. Now it's interesting. You see at the moment, you see how fast the sun is going. So each movement it's faster movements, and this is where I'm going to maybe just explain to you as well. When I modeled this in a 3D way, and I actually kept when I kept the sun and the moon on the same plane throughout, I couldn't get the moon phases to work, and I struggled for days and days and days, and then suddenly it came to me, and that is that they actually change in elevation. And I don't have a graphic, and I'm not going to do a video to explain about to demonstrate it, but I'll explain to you. When I modeled this thing with the sun and the moon being a ball, I couldn't get the phases to work, and I came to realize two things. One, they are disc shaped, or rather sort of, I think the word used there that Enoch was using is, if you could imagine, you can search the word orb. I did have it searched, and I think I closed that tab. You can go search the word orb on the internet, and they describe it as a ball or a UFO shaped object. So think of a discus, that the athletes use, that disc that they throw. if you think about that shape, I believe that that is much closer to what the shape of the moon and the sun is. Not completely flat, but more like that sort of shape, that sort of UFO shape. And if you, I can, to get the phases of the moon to work, it was about elevation. And first of all, that shape, that disc sort of semi-flat disc shape, and the second thing was elevation. So you can do this experiment yourself. Take a dinner plate, take a white dinner plate, and take a bedside lamp. Hold the plate on the same level as the globe, as the bedside lamp. Hold it at the same level as the lamp, and then slowly lift the plate up, and you'll see the phases, the light starting to reflect off the bottom of the dinner plate until eventually it's fully lit. And that's exactly what happens with our moon, I believe. As the elevation of the moon, when it's 180 degrees opposite the sun, is not only opposite, it is higher than the elevation of the sun, and that's what gives us our full moon. Then it comes down again until to new moon. It's on the same elevation, and then it doesn't reflect any light. And that's the only way. When I modeled that in the 3D model, I got it to work perfectly. And I spent a fair amount of time on this. Chantal can testify to that. She got actually quite annoyed with me with the amount of time that I spent on the computer with that particular model. And I believe that God took it away from me, because not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't ready for His time to be shared. And I lost my whole hard drive, everything. I lost. Well, I had a complete hard drive crash. I managed to recover some documents, but there were big sections in the hard drive, big sectors in the hard drive that I completely lost. And that model was one of that. I was actually at that point I just said, that's it. I'm not building it again. I'd proven my point. I'd determined what I wanted to determine, and I just decided to leave it at that. And that was about 3.5, 4 years ago. And I put it all away, and I got on with other things. And now when this whole Enoch thing came up again, it all came back to me, and I decided to just put this together, try and show you guys what I believe Enoch is really telling us and what he's really saying. Okay, so while I've been speaking, you can see that's been playing, and the sun has now moved quite fast, moved away from the moon, and it's getting brighter and brighter, and you'll also see the sun is getting closer and closer. I'm just going to shift. I'm not going to change the speed, but I'm going to just move the graphic on a little bit so that we can try and get to the place where you'll see as we go along. You'll see now. You'll see how the sun is now changed. It's getting closer and closer. Before it was running over here. Now it's running much closer to the North Pole, and this is now when we have now the summer situation. So, and you'll see the speed is also changed. It takes the same amount of time to do one revolution as what it did when it was out here. So the time to do a revolution was in the real world situation is 24 hours to do a full revolution. Whether it's out here or whether it's close to the North Pole, it's still 24 hours. And the only way that can happen is if it actually slows down a bit. And I managed to model that. It was the trick was understanding the wheel within the wheel. That I think it was Ezekiel that saw a vision. He spoke about the wheel within a wheel, and when I modeled that concept of the wheel within the wheel, I'm not going to get into detail now, but I was able to model that exact situation where the sun actually slows down and it completes a revolution in the same amount of time. It took 24 hours to complete the revolution, whether it was at the North Pole or whether it was way out at the Tropic of Capricorn. It took the same amount of time to complete the revolution a day. So anyway, that's just some interesting things to note. Also, at the high point of the sun is when it gets closer to the North Pole. This is when it's at its high point. So it's furthest away from the surface. When it's closer to the North Pole, and when it goes out, it goes lower. So it moves faster, but it's also lower. And I believe that's one of the reasons why the climate is so different. In South Africa and Australia and South America have very, very similar climates. That sort of arid, we have hot summers. We don't have the humidity factor, but we have much more heat. That's to do, I believe, with the sun being much closer to the surface over us than when it's over Europe. Europe, it's further away from the surface and not as much heat gets there. Although it is traveling slower, it is further away, so it is a little bit colder in those regions, relatively speaking. I mean, on the average, I know they get hot. You guys get hot days there as well in the north, but we're not called sunny South Africa for no reason. And the same with Australia. Very, very similar climate in Australia. So I think that pretty much demonstrates what I wanted to demonstrate with regard to the flat Earth. There was another 3D version of this that I came across, and I thought that was really pretty cool. So just to complete the picture, and then I'm going to go into Stellarium, and where I can play around, where I can go backwards and forwards, and I can control the sun, moon, and stars in Stellarium. And I'm going to reveal something to you that I'm pretty sure most people don't know with regards to Stellarium. But I'm going to get to that now. So let's have a look at this. This is the video that I came across, and I'm just going to play it for a while. And when you watch this, just think about. I want you to pray about, and ask God what to reveal to you. I think when you understand that He's created a place that is fully protected by a dome, and that He's in control of everything that goes in and out of this place, and you understand what the beauty of what He's done. I want you to look at it also from a perspective of the apple of His eye. And I know we're talking about Jerusalem being the apple of His eye, but I believe this earth is also the apple of His eye. And when you look at it from that perspective, and you understand how much He loves us and the beauty of the place that He's created to put us into, I think you're going to see things with a whole new pair of eyes. So without any further ado, let me play this video. Yeah, it's really moving when you look at it. I just wanted to go back and just take you through, point out a few things. Okay, so this Michael Yusuf that put this together. Thank you, Michael. Again, he's made the sun and the moon two different sizes, and I believe that's modeled incorrectly. I think they are the same size, although maybe it's trying to just show that there's the brightness, maybe the brightness is more about it. Anyway. Just something to bear in mind. Enoch also says they're the same size. And the other interesting thing is when you look at this and you visualize the human eye with the white of the eye going out and this being the center of the eye, I think you'll understand why I think this whole creation is much closer to that whole apple of the eye. Becomes a hell of a lot more meaningful when you view it from that perspective. We've got this ice wall, the white, and this whiteness, I don't believe anybody really knows how far it actually goes. I mean, some have speculated. You can search. There's Admiral Byrd that in the early 1900s they went on an expedition. I think it was just prior to the First World War, if I recall correctly. It's a while since I read it up. And he went out. They went out on an expedition with a whole lot of military hardware, ships and various planes, and I don't know what else they took out there, and they went and explored these areas. And don't let anybody fool you that Antarctica is just the one blob at the bottom of the ball. It's not. It goes all around us. And there's a treaty that prevents people from being able to go to this area. And it's a military restricted zone that a number of the main countries, I think there's about 7 or 8 countries that have signed this treaty that do not allow anybody to go in here. So it's a very protected zone. It's a very strange thing to do, to protect something that's actually just, why protect the Arctic? I mean, there's apparently nothing there, but Admiral Byrd had some very interesting things to say about it. And I think a lot of what he saw and a lot of the things that he discovered have been kept under wraps. But there's some interesting stuff there, and I believe they went, and they might have actually gone a little bit deeper into it, and they could even have discovered the firmament, the place where the what is described as the terrible crystal. I think Enoch describes it as the terrible crystal in other sections of the book, where it actually comes down and it seals off and it closes off. Either that, or they discovered some other stuff there. But there's something going on these regions. But when you just have a look at it, I mean, this is an eye, and it's just the whiteness going out. And the other concept I just want to highlight to you, when we spoke about the flood, we always wonder, where did all that water go to, and where did all that water come from? Well, I believe that when the Bible speaks about the fountains of the deep were opened, I believe this is the fountains of the deep. This snow, this ice was melted. God melted it, and that just covered this whole earth with water. And then he reversed the whole process, and he took it back again. So that's what I believe the fountain of the deep was all about. This massive, big, huge volume of water all around, and we don't know how far this stretches out. Probably huge, and there might even be others. I don't know. There's a whole lot of, some people have come up with the concept that there are multiple of these versions around, but I'm not going to get into that. I believe there's only one, but I do believe it goes way, way further out, and that the firmament is does come down and touches. There is a point where you would theoretically be able to walk up to the firmament and touch it. But the problem is that the weather conditions are such that as a human you are limited in terms of your ability to traverse this. You can read Enoch. There's a number of sections in Enoch. He was taken to some of these areas. It's not in these chapters that we're covering at the moment in this video, but there are other sections where Enoch describes some stuff that I believe will shed some light on some of these things. He was also taken to a place of chaos. He said it was a chaotic place, and he didn't want to be there anymore. It was like really bad. It was an unprotected area, and I believe that was a place. Maybe it was below the earth, where it was completely unprotected, outside of the dome area. So those are all just my ideas. I just wanted to share that with you. But when you understand, with this understanding of what the flat Earth model really looks like, I believe we're now in a position to really understand what Enoch was saying.